Robin. I'm doing a podcast.
Good evening. This is the 23rd of March, 2026. Eric Brown here on the Detroit in Black and White channel, which presents Reality Strikes featuring yours truly. And I have a great show today. And the reason why I'm so excited about today's show is that, I have my good friend, Dr. Clarence Nixon Jr. as the guest. Dr. Nixon is someone I've been knowing for, I guess, been about 10 years now. I met you through Stuart Boswell when we were doing a radio station. That was well over 10 years ago. And, you're one of my favorite. I mean, we rock and talk about literacy all the time. We've had some very engaging conversations. And before I start, I want people to like, subscribe, and share this very important conversation and discussion, because recently I came across two situations. I briefly talked about it to you earlier today, Dr. Nixon. One centered around a kindergartner in one of the Detroit area schools. They are about 6-7 weeks away from the end of the school year. Kindergartners go to school all day in Detroit. They're all day just like the 1st through 12th graders. But yet here we are 7 weeks away from the end of the school year, and you have a kindergartner that cannot count to 20. This is a real story. I'm not making this up. I spoke to a good friend of mine who's a teacher. Actually, she's a dean of a school, and she's at a K-8, and she just is at her wit's end with regards to the fact that here you have a kindergartner almost at the end of the school year who cannot count to 20. Another situation, an 11th grader who is 7 weeks away, 6-7 weeks away from the end of the school year. And what's interesting about this 11th grader is that in the fall of 2023, only 5% of Detroit students were reading at the appropriate grade level, leaving 8th grade to go into the 9th grade, which means that the class of 2027, 95% of those potential graduates enter high school not being proficient at the grade level for which they were leaving, 8th grade. Currently, this young man that I'm speaking of has a 0.57 GPA. And I did not stutter. I did not say Heinz 57 steak sauce. I said a 0.57 GPA. So the question that I am posing, and we will get into it, my guest, Dr. Nixon, we will get into it after I give you some information on who he is and read his bio. But the question I have for this evening, and I want the audience, those that are chiming in, Derek Henry, Karen Winston, Mr. 1213, G Money Hollywood. I want you all to chime in as well, because here's the question. Where does accountability start, and who is responsible for holding whom accountable? Again, where does accountability start, and who is responsible for holding whom accountable? And Dr. Clarence Nixon has an amazing program over at the T-Lab in Garden City. I just found out through our good friend about some of the students that are doing some training for certifications. I mean, young black men as young as 15, 14, 9th, 10th graders. So Stuart was telling me about that today. But first, let me introduce Dr. Clarence Nixon. And as Dr. Clarence Nixon Jr., PhD, he's a visionary, an entrepreneur, and a seasoned executive with over 40 years of experience driving innovation and excellence in information technology management. His distinguished career spans in industries including automotive, consumer goods, education, healthcare, and more, where he has consistently delivered competitive advantages through cutting-edge IT solutions and strategic leadership. As the co-founder and CEO of T-Lab, and that's small lowercase t dot capitalized L-A-B, Dr. Nixon leads a groundbreaking organization dedicated to advancing education through digital systems. Under his leadership, T-Lab students have achieved academic excellence in the 95th percentile, especially a medium ACT score of 31. And that's 31 out of 36, correct, Dr. Nixon?
Yes.
Earning recognition from prestigious institutions and awards such as the ITSMF Dove Award, McDonald's Corporation Award for Innovation in Education, U.S. Minority Contracts, Thurgood Marshall Award, and recognition from the Milwaukee Fellows. Dr. Nixon's entrepreneurial approach and commitment to results have guided numerous organizations through transformations. At CNC Group, LLC, he led turnaround initiatives that enhanced business operations, reduced costs, and boosted revenues. Earlier in his career, roles at global powerhouses like Sara Lee Corporation, Alcoa, and General Motors saw him spearheading major systems optimizations, achieving outcomes such as increased efficiency, millions in cost savings, and elevated brand performance. I introduced to you Dr. Nixon, and I'll get a little bit more into his bio, but with regard to the question, Dr. Nixon, what is your perspective on the accountability factor when it comes to the state of education, particularly the state of education in the Black community?
I mean, great question. And thank you, Eric, for having me on your show today. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you and all that you do to enhance and to bring this whole issue of literacy, to bring that issue to the forefront, because it is critical. But as you do what you do as a leader, what I'd say is that the persons who are responsible and who are accountable are leaders. Leaders are accountable. So, I mean, especially those who are in formal positions of leadership. So, and you don't have to go too far to know who are the formal leaders. So that would be superintendents, that would be principals, that would be school board members. Those would be the people who would be responsible and accountable for the performance in education.
And that's interesting, Dr. Nixon, because the school that this kindergartner is at was going to be one of the schools. I'm on a Juneteenth Jubilee Detroit committee, and we're having a literacy reading contest amongst 4 schools. Originally, this school, and I won't name the school because that's not important. You know, it is a DPS school. I just leave it at that. That school was going to be a participant in this competition. Unfortunately, the dean of students was like, no, they are not going to embarrass me. And I felt that from her because, you know, as a kindergartner, you're 5 years old, 4 or 5, late 4, early 5 to start kindergartner. And to not be able to count to 20 this late in the school year is just unsettling to me, because when I tried to grasp what she was saying to me and telling me about this student who also has 43 absences. So absences don't play a role in it because the way the school system is set up, all someone has to do is call in an excuse for a student being absent, and that's an excused absence. So that goes to talk about how the DPS is fudging the numbers when it comes to not just attendance, but we know they're fudging the number when they talk about the graduation rates, because those that are graduating are not prepared to go on to the next stage of life. So it goes beyond, because, you know, you could count and walk at the same time. That's how a lot of people learn how to count. So it's very unsettling that this is a situation, and I had to respect her decision to not want her school to participate in this event on June 20th. It's a 3-month event, 2.5-month event leading up to the Juneteenth event on June 20th in Detroit. So we talk about leadership. We talk about who's accountable. I often say that, yes, parents are where it starts. Learning starts at home. But I always say, my perspective, there's a caveat to that, because we do know a lot of these parents are the product of the crack epidemic era, and they also are the product of when there became a very interesting force when it came to education in a lot of these urban school districts. So parents, and I'm not the biggest fan of the current governor, but I do give her credit for establishing the My Leap program. The My Leap goal is to deal with education from the cradle to the grave. So there are some things that are being put in place, and it's a little bit too early to tell because the program has not went through a full cycle of being in existence. And there's still some work to be done, still some research, still some numbers gathering. But the question in and of itself, Dr. Nixon, where does the accountability lie in your opinion?
The accountability lies, with the leaders that you just mentioned. So it would lie with the governor. There's no question. It would lie with our state representatives, our state senators. It lies with leadership. And it lies with community leadership. So whether it's pastors and churches, it lies with all of them. And of course, parents bear a significant portion of that responsibility. But it lies with leadership, because when communities can't figure out how to do something, somebody has to step in and do something. And obviously, communities, and this is just the African American community, just can't figure out how to educate itself. It's just not doing a good job.
And when you speak of leadership, Dr. Nixon, are you also, and I'm going to, you should be able to see the comments in the comment section as well. And if you cannot, I will highlight them as I see them come across the screen. But when you talk about leadership, are you also, who do you define as the leaders? Because you have the familial leadership, you have the school leadership, you have the community organization leadership, you have the philanthropic leadership, you have the business community leadership, you have the church leadership, as you explained. So what component of those in leadership, because even the politicians, a lot of people want to call them leaders. I often say they are just people elected to leadership roles. And, that's real talk, because we've seen a lot of politicians that are far from leaders, even though they are in a leadership role. So with regards to your definition of leaders and leadership, who are you pinpointing to say are the leaders that need to be a part of the process to turn this around? Because we've had numerous conversations, and we both agree the educational crisis, be it urban communities, rural communities, the Appalachians, the Mississippis of the world, is a very fixable problem. So where are the leaders failing in fixing this problem?
Well, you've asked two big questions. Who are they? And I would just say formally, it would be those who have in their job description or in their responsibility, it would be those who have education and the delivery of services to the community. It would be those who have that in their job descriptions. And so when you look at the job descriptions of, some of the people that we've just named, they certainly have it. And so whether it be the governor, whether it be state senators, state representatives, whether it be people who are in the council, anybody who has in their job description the well-being of people. Anybody who has the well-being of people, because this is, for me, it is the issue. It is the issue. It is the issue for us.
And let's talk about the current comment that's there from Mr. 1213. As it relates to the kindergartner that cannot count to 20, his comment is, I will wait until that kindergartner gets to the midterm of the first grade to be able to count to 20. If that kindergartner can't count to 20 by then, maybe extra attention is needed toward him. And, you know, my take on that comment is that why wait until midway through the first grade when midway through the kindergartner course, even though kindergarten is not required in the state of Michigan, but still, not just midway through the kindergarten year, a quarter of the way through the kindergarten year, that young man should be able to count to 20. I don't care. I don't see how any other way one can look at that to not understand that someone in the kindergarten that's going to school all day should have been able to count to 20 by the time they got into school on August the 20. They started school this year on August the 24th, I think. So August the 24th, 2025, that kid should have been able to count to 20. That's just my perspective. You know, I'm not discounting what Mr. 1213 is saying, but waiting until the halfway through the first grade is way too late, because halfway through the first grade, he should be counting to 100.
Well, what Mr. 1213, what he points out is a huge issue in our systems. And the question is, what are we doing in our systems and how do we measure it? What do we do and how do we measure it? And so, you know, in our organization, you know, it is all about benchmarks. You know, we have standards to measure from pre-K through undergraduate. And you can't wait until a child is behind before you believe you're going to start applying and helping that child. If the child is behind, that is probably the worst situation for any child to be in, and be in a classroom situation. So you just can't wait to then. So it's all about the systems. So what are we doing and how do we measure it? And are we measuring the right things? Are we measuring the right things? So those become the things that become pretty significant and pretty important.
And then there's another comment from G Money Hollywood. Just a point of clarification, G Money, the GPA currently is 0.57, not 0.75. And his comment is that the person that has a 0.75 GPA is most likely just not applying themselves. Oh, that's a very true statement. However, I think he is lacking parental guidance, mentoring, and lack of interest from the school body. He needs guidance. That speaks to the question. You know, with whom does the accountability lies? Because obviously at 0.57, that person is just showing up.
But you got to look at it from this respect. What about students? You know, there was a student at a local high school, and this was back in 2020, and the student graduated from a local DPS high school at the top of their class, valedictorian. And the student went to a pretty significant state school. And the student took all of their examinations, and the student did not pass any of the entry examinations. The student was basically deemed to be basically just totally incompetent and could not pass. And so in a grade market where grade inflation exists, it's hard to take and use things like GPA to even measure what a student knows.
Right.
So a 0.75, yeah. I mean, I would think that student might have some challenges, but very well knowing what's happening with grade inflation. Oh no, we can't use those sorts of measurements and metrics anymore to measure competence.
And then the next comment is from Les Moore. Some/many youngsters and adults choose to navigate and adopt these educational protocols at their own pace or choose not to at all. Still, many of them live a fulfilling life. Well, fulfilling life is subjective, just like success is subjective. So, to say what a fulfilling life is, I mean, that's, waking up, living through the day, going to sleep, waking up to live another day. That's a fulfilling life for some people. That's not success, so to speak, or that's not a productive life. And the productive life and the fulfilling life are not mutually inclusive, from my perspective.
But Eric, this whole notion of the issues that we have with respect to not performing at the standards and the benchmarks is just too critical and too important. And so how could we be the number one on any negative list for healthcare? How could we be at the last of the economic list? How can we be at the top of the negative list and at the bottom of the positive list, and these measures not be important? It's got to be important in terms of having a fulfilling life. And obviously, we have too many who are not leading fulfilling lives.
And then you bring up a great point, Dr. Nixon, because one of the things that I often speak on is to ask anyone that wants to debate the numbers or debate the perspective that I have about education. I tell them to do two things. Search the socioeconomic factors, and there are 17 of them. In addition to that, look at the M-STEP scores in the state of Michigan. And if you're not satisfied with the M-STEP scores, look at the NAEP scores. The NAEP is the so-called national report card. And to your point, and I tell people this all the time, we being Black people, are at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to every last one of those standards. When I wrote a petition to get a new chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi in Macomb County, I looked at the 23 cities in Macomb County, some with as low as a 1.7% Black population, some as much as a 35% Black population. But in every last one of those 23 cities, educational outcomes for Black boys and girls in the K through 12 system were all at the bottom of the totem pole, every last one. And I used that information to substantiate why there was a need for an African-American organization of men to be allowed to exist as a chapter in Macomb County. The petition was successful. You now have a Macomb County chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. But even going further than that, before I got into human resources, my career was in health administration. My senior thesis, I wrote on the assets of healthcare in rural and urban communities, which is another problem. It's no different than the food deserts and the grocery stores and more gas stations and grocery stores and party stores and all that. So no one is blaming crack parents. One of the things that I do, and I'm not sure if you ever knew this, Dr. Nixon, I used to write for the Detroit News with regards to political blogs. I did that for about 12 years. The one thing I prided myself on is being able to provide facts. Not anything I pulled out my rear end, but I provided facts. And that was one of the greatest compliments I always get from people that read my pieces. You present things from a not just an educational perspective, but a factual perspective. So crack parents, I'm not blaming crack parents, but medical diagnoses and studies have proven that drugs, specifically the crack epidemic, has played a major role in the downward spiral of education in the urban community, vis-a-vis Black people, of which Black people were being sold drugs by Black people. So to say that it does it follow that white parents who use crack choice of meth, yes, it does. I mean, a drug is a drug. It doesn't matter if it's a meth. It doesn't matter if it's opioids. It doesn't matter if it's crack. It's no different. Drugs have a negative impact on the learning process. Don't believe me? Do your own research. So this compare and contrast of black, white, and which drug is being used does not make sense. I will only challenge you to do your own research, Les Moore. Again, my background prior to human resources was health administration. My senior thesis was done on access to healthcare in the urban and rural communities. So again, I am a product of the explosion of the crack epidemic. I didn't sell, I did not use, but I know a lot of people that were negatively impacted by drugs in the urban community. And again, my focus will always be on my skin color. I love black people. So my focus will be trying to do whatever is necessary to improve our circumstances as a people in America. Any further comment on that comment, Dr. Nixon?
No, I certainly understand your need and your desire to help those who look like you. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I think your comment about about drugs and how drugs certainly and the prevalence of drugs certainly has been a issue, and it's not just an issue in the African American community, but it's an issue here in America, period. And so you've got to know that is a huge issue that causes some of the challenges that we are discussing.
And G Money Hollywood brings up an interesting point, because I've always had a perspective when it comes to C-level individuals, the business community, the philanthropic community, because it's not just about their financial bottom line. There's a documentary that, I have suggested people watch, the international version. The American version will be out soon. And that documentary is called Poverty Inc. Poverty Inc. shows how profitable those that are supposed to be helping the impoverished, the homeless, the poor, are profiting off the misery of others. No different than the educational crisis. Those individuals are profiting, but we say this all the time about how fixable of a problem it is. But those that are needed to fix it are not involved in trying to fix it. A lot of stuff when they have these town hall meetings, all that stuff sounds good and dandy. But what are the results? Because I can easily point to almost any city across America, black, white, rural, it doesn't matter. The highest percentage of an educated community in this country, the number one educational outcome state in this country is Massachusetts. They only have a literacy rate of 42%, and that covers all of their citizens. They're number one. Michigan currently is 44. So if there was a need for people to get involved and fix this crisis, it is now. It's not going to, the only way that's going to change is everyone getting involved. We get involved with loving our sports. We get involved with, wanting more for a team to win a Super Bowl than for 500 kids to walk across the stage with ACT scores of, I won't even say 36, ACT scores of an average of 25. So it's a matter of our priorities and what we see as more important, when the most important thing is education. Knowledge is key. It's something that can never be taken away from you. And with your career and your background in the C-suite level, what were some of the conversations when it came to hiring people out of college, or even jobs that did not require a college degree, but a high school diploma? What were some of the conversations that took place when it came to filling these jobs? And not just at the C-suite level, Dr. Nixon, but just in general for opening throughout the company.
Well, in my corporate life, my corporate life was always driven on the bottom line, and we were always measuring the right thing in the bottom line. And so it seems to me that today we're not measuring the right thing. We're not measuring the correct thing. So when we're measuring things like GPA alone, or when we're looking at things like graduation rates, those aren't the things that demonstrate competence. And so those are the things you got to do. You got to measure the right thing. And when you're measuring the right thing, then and only then can you demonstrate the level of performance that's consistent with success.
And I want to thank RPS 310, watching and listening all the way from the great state of California. And she speaks to my daughter, 3 years old, and she can already count to 20. That's where it should be. We should not be having kindergartners not being able to count to 20. I don't care how you look at it. We have to, and I think far too often we look to make excuses rather than holding people accountable and demanding better. And that's one of the unfortunate fabrics of the Black community. We point fingers at everyone else except ourselves, or we fail to look in the mirror and say, where does the change start? Because making excuses for someone that cannot read at the age of 5, 6, depending on when he started kindergarten and when his birthday is just, in my opinion, inexcusable. I mean, I got into the literacy advocacy March 5th, 2017, after reading about a 12th grade student who was reading at a first grade level. And I think the unfortunate part about that is it was a focus feature article in Crane's Detroit Business Magazine that became a documentary. And even with that being said, there was a lack of outrage. Even a year prior, in 2016, when you had students sue the state of Michigan for a quality education. And these were Black students from Detroit Osborne, a lack of outrage, but let the Lions lose a playoff game. There's all kinds of outrage. So our priorities, I'm sorry, are just mixed up. We have to do better. That's Black, white, green, purple, all individuals that places a higher priority on being fans of an entertainment industry and having less concern of Black and brown boys and girls getting to the next stage of life because they cannot read. That's an unfortunate reality that we must address and we must be serious about. And Mr. 1213, things must have changed from 60 years ago. And can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because there has been dynamics. 60 years ago, Detroit was not just Detroit, Baltimore, I think, had one of the top high schools in the whole country. And now Baltimore is one of the worst school districts where the top 5 school districts that are the worst. Baltimore is either somewhere between 1 and 5. And they spend more money per pupil, twice as much as they do in Detroit. So I think people, one of the excuses people always come up with is, more money. Money is not the answer. Gretchen Whitmer stated that as much in her 2025 State of the State. Her is pretty much, not verbatim, but her words were, we cannot keep investing all this money and not getting a return on that investment. So even she realized that money is not the answer, even though her budget for 2026 increased the amount to be spent on education after you just got through saying money is not the answer a year before in your State of the State. And there's often conversations about money being the answer. What is your take on that, Dr. Nixon, when it comes to the spending and not getting results based on the spending that's taking place?
You must get results. You must get results. And then to do so, you must keep up with the benchmarks. I mean, time changes, technology changes, the market changes, and what people must be able to do, it changed. And so what a person could have done, 10 years ago, as a 20-year-old, um, is is a pittance compared to what a 20-year-old needs to know today. And so that's the reason why those benchmarks become so critical and important. And if we don't keep up with the benchmarks, if we don't keep up with what the performance levels are and what they should be, we'll never get there. We'll never get there.
Right.
And we live in a global society. So we are competing globally. And in other parts of the world, I mean, children are just performing at exceptional levels academically. And so whether they are 3 years old, whether they are 2 years old, whether they're 1 year old, they're performing at exceptional levels. And so we can't afford to lean on, our laurels of what used to be good. What used to be good is what used to be good.
Right.
Today, it's a different game, a total different game.
And this goes to the question at hand about the accountability factor. Where does the accountability lie, and with whom does it lie? Because being 6-7 weeks away from the end of the school year, G Money Hollywood says that this 5-year-old, most likely 5-year-old, could have a mental challenge. That's not something that I was privy to, but under the same token, that's something that somebody should have figured out prior to 6-7 weeks before the end of the school year, because chances are he will be passed on to the first grade, and come August of 2026. He will be in the first grade at this particular school. If his mother or father does not take him out and put him in another school, he still would be a first grader that probably should have been held back, but he won't be held back. And then you have Miss Suzuki, and thanks for joining this evening, Miss Suzuki. Her comment is about grade inflation, and that's another topic that is a very hot topic. Grade inflation is the reason companies like the Big Three test employees before hiring them. In the past, all you had to do was submit your resume. And what's interesting about that, Ms. Suzuki, I used to work in HR for one of the Big Three. And we had an outside entity that performed the testing for us. We didn't see the employees until they were set up for a physical. After the physical, they passed that successfully. They were invited to participate in onboarding. But even with that being the case, and this is 8-9 years ago, the highest percentage of individuals not passing this 4th grade level test were people of color, predominantly Black men of color. And there were 2 obstacles, Dr. Nixon: not passing the test and not passing the drug test. Seeing that being a major problem, the union was able to negotiate getting rid of the drug test, since marijuana is legal in the state of Michigan. Still, you cannot overcome the 4th grade aptitude test that people were not passing. And that's still the case to this day. People are, young Black men and Black women, brown men and brown women are not passing this 4th grade test. That's still, you see that if that is the case, the educational system is still failing these individuals, and they're just passing them along. I mean, you're talking about a graduation rate and bragging about that, but how many of those individuals, and I stated earlier, the class of 27 in Detroit Public Schools entered the fall of 23 with only 5% of those individuals being proficient readers at the grade level for which they had just left. So, come June of 2027, which is just over 12, 15 months from now, that 5% will probably not increase no more than 15%, just statistically. But you're bragging about graduation rates, and even the Detroit Economic Group for the last 3 or 4 years, they put out a study, state of education in the state of Michigan, where 70% of 12th graders are leaving high school, not being prepared for not only college, but they're not prepared for life after high school. That is a crisis. That is a problem. And, we can talk about that, but, one of the things that I appreciate about what you're doing over at T-Lab, you have the data, you have the statistics, and you have the stories of success of those that were in your program and have been able to successfully complete the program beyond results that speaks to you and your team being committed to ensuring that the crisis is fixable, and you found a way to fix it. I mean, they found a way to fix it in Mississippi. Mississippi was 49th. Mississippi is now 19th. What are they doing that we're not doing here in the state of Michigan? Well, the one thing they are doing, they're proving that it's fixable. When you focus on making it a primary issue in your state, I guess you get tired of being second or last. So they found a way to say enough of this. Now we're going to do what needs to be done to get us where we need to be.
But you talked about who should we be holding accountable, and obviously it begins with leadership, but curriculum becomes critical and important, and holding parents and especially holding students accountable and responsible for their performance becomes very, very, very important. I mean, that's one of the things that we do in T-Lab. Students have to be accountable for how they spend 168 hours a week. And we measure it and we go through it with them. I mean, and so that's just an example of the things you have to do. But yeah, you have to build a system that maintains a culture of accountability. And when you can have a culture of accountability, you can have the kind of success that is necessary for the level of performance that we know we should be experiencing with our children.
And that leads into another great comment from Lisa. And Lisa and her husband Ernesto have been some of my biggest supporters when it comes to my literacy advocacy. They have been able to provide me with books to pass out at the various events that I have put on and or collaborated with other organizations. And the greatest thing about what they have done when it comes to the books that I pass out, the books are 90%, 95% of which are written by numerous authors. But the key is the pictures on the book, the faces on the book are of those that look like us. And I'll never forget, a few years ago at an event I held at Wayne State University, there was a young lady working on her master's in education. She had her daughter down there with her in the library at Wayne State while she went to class. She stopped by the booth. She said, I'm going to send my daughter by here. So myself and a friend of mine, we're talking, me and him just kicking it, talking about sports because it was football season, college football. I don't watch the NFL, so it was college football season that we were talking about. And all of a sudden we hear this young lady crying. And I think I shared this story with you, Dr. Nixon, maybe 2 years ago. So we hear this young lady crying. We're like, okay, are you okay? And she was saying, I've just never seen so many books with people that look like me on them. That profound statement is one of the reasons why that young lady picked up like 10 or 12 books, Dr. Nixon, because the books are free. I get them from Lisa and her husband, Ernesto. They get them from an organization. We provide them to the community, and they're easy reads. And I'm currently writing a book, and I learned about this one, not platform, but this one process you can use called Easy Read, because Easy Read edits your writing to make it easily readable for those, because most magazines, newspaper articles are written at the 4th to 6th grade level. So it's a software package that formats your writing to make it easily readable for those that are your intended audience. So Lisa's saying, let's have student success conferences. And this is something me and her have talked about in the past. at the beginning of the year in all schools to uplift our youth and support families with resources like how to check grades online, how to prepare for tests or opt out, how to write emails to the school, and info about IEP, individual educational plans, and 505. I think she meant 504. So that's a great idea, because even with Detroit Public School System, they have a couple of student representatives on the Board of Education. But those student representatives need to have a voice, not just be names and faces on a board where they don't have a voice. I think that's one way you would get more parents involved, as well as getting more students involved and coming down to the school board meetings of first or second Tuesday of every month. Because just to have them on the board, they cannot hold anybody accountable. They're just a voice. So they need to be given some responsibilities, not just to take back to their school, because all these schools are not represented on that board. I think there's only 2 or 3 students, and 2 of them are from Cass, if I'm not mistaken. So they need representation from all of the schools on such a committee, or just have, if I was in high school today, being the rebel that I am, I would petition the city council as well as the mayor to amend the charter, whereas you would have, since the elected officials always want to talk about the Board of Education is out of our purview, I would force, or at least talk to them about amending the charter to give the students a voice. Because remember, students are the ones that sued the state of Michigan, Detroit students. And the unfortunate thing about that, back in 2016, they could not even find a local lawyer, not just within the Detroit area, but across the state of Michigan. The lawyers that represented them were from the state of California. So how sad is that education was not important enough for people to feel that a quality education was needed for Black and brown students in the city of Detroit, that no lawyer was willing to take on a case. Why? I don't know. I do know one of the litigants in that that was party to that lawsuit, the settlement. And even with the settlement, people don't know where that $93 to $94 million when or how is being spent. So you have to get involved, and all this information is readily available for people to find out, but you have to be willing to get your hands dirty like you've been doing for years with your T-Lab, and be a part of assisting Black and brown girls so that they can get into some of the colleges and become the success that a lot of your students have become.
Eric, one of the things that I find interesting in the best prep schools in America, one of the things that they all have in common, they teach their students how to study. One of the things that you will find common in a lot of public schools, they don't teach their students how to study. Studying is a science, and folks and students need to be taught how to study. And it just does not happen today. It's one of the things that we do. We have our own proprietary study skills course, and it's one that drives students to be proactive in their learning and independent, versus what the systems today push students to do is to be reactive and to be dependent upon teachers. And that's just not the environment that you're going to have that's going to produce the level of excellence that it takes in order to be able to compete. It's just
right.
not the environment. And
I'm going to say this, Les Moore, maybe I'm not the show for you, because all you continue to do is have a contrarian opinion. How does your opening a Greek fraternity? It is not a Greek fraternity. It's a Greek letter fraternity first and foremost. So let me correct you on that. In Macomb County, beneficial to the uplifting of students, particularly Black students. Well, do your research, do your research, Les Moore. A few years ago, there was a lawsuit filed in one of those predominantly white schools due to setting a different standard for allowing Black students in their student government. And since you always want to make things about Black and white, and you've been listening to and watching Detroit Black and White for months. I have yet to see you offer any solutions. Bitching, moaning, and whining is easy. What solutions are you offering? I can handle the heat because I'm making a difference in the community. So for you to say what difference is a Black Greek letter organization making in a county that's predominantly white, I can tell you right now, Omega Psi Phi, Alpha Phi Alpha, Kappa Alpha Psi are doing some amazing things in Macomb County. Do your research, you'll find out for yourself. I'll leave it at that. But again, you're also asking the question, being able to count to 20 is important for what reasons? If you have to ask that question, then the problem lies with you, and you need to go find the mirror and see where the problem really lies, because that image will be you. And again, my show may not be for you, and you can find something else to do on Monday night at 8:30, but your contrarian perspective is not what this show is about. I'm going to keep it real. People that know me know that's how I am. So if you're going to continue to be contrarian, find another show to bitch, whine, and moan about. This is not it. Not here at Reality Strikes.
Well, Eric, and another issue is the whole challenge of artificial intelligence and leveraging and using it. If you don't expose, if you don't provide students with those skills and abilities that it takes, you are pushing them further and further behind. Further and further behind.
Right. And G Money Hollywood, I'm in HR. Most American manufacturing industries that are hourly and blue collar workers are illiterate. I don't dispute that. I've already stated that it was a 4th grade test that was given to get into Ford Motor Company. So I don't dispute that. The big three is definitely guilty of that. They are. But under the same token, if you know it's a 4th grade test because people talk, what are people on the outside looking in doing to prepare these individuals to be able to pass the test, a 4th grade test, so they can get a decent job that pays well with great benefits and opportunity to get skilled trades? So I think far too often we come up with these parameters to make it seem like we're making sense, but you're stating the obvious. And I can attest to that because I've been in the automobile industry as an HR representative, as a labor relations specialist. So it's not breaking news.
But this doesn't excuse the fact that so many Black kids are illiterate. This doesn't excuse it because their parents were, or because their parents are. This doesn't excuse it.
But but we both know, Dr. Nixon, we are a people that have perfected the art of excuses. We come up with excuses and pointing the fingers, but again, where are the solutions? Where are the people in the community getting their hands dirty? I don't even live in Detroit. I spend more time in Detroit with working with nonprofit, working with organizations, trying to do my part to ensure that kids are educated, being involved with things, but then you have people that want to say you're critical of Black people. Well, who the hell am I supposed to be critical of? I'm not green, blue, purple, or yellow, or white. So I'm going to always ask and demand better of my people. And if you can't handle that, again, this is not the show for you. Maybe you need to go on the Call Them Out show, where they give out Sambo awards. I don't do that. I don't use the N-word. I don't call people Sambos. I don't call people sellouts. I definitely do not call people anything less than what they are, which are human beings. Yeah. And what I'm going to do is offer opportunities and chances for people to do better, because when you know better, you do better.
I'm not sure. Maybe a good percentage of the big three. Maybe it used to be an issue with hourly and blue collar workers, but today the vast majority of the employees are in healthcare, and the vast majority of the folks who work in healthcare are literate and can read and are college educated. And so Yeah, this could be an issue with the old big three. I'm not sure whether that's the case today. It used to be that General Motors was the number one employer in the state, but not anymore.
And this is a comment from Barbershop Talk WRCH. She feels like she studied correctly until she receives her first test results back. She doesn't know why she fails her test when she studied. I've helped her study until she failed the test. And this is a good question for you, comment for you to address, Dr. Nixon.
I mean, it is all about preparation. Our kids have to develop detailed study plans for the new semester, at least 2 months before the new semester begins. And so you have to go to every class knowing you're not going to a class and not be abreast of the content that's being presented. You have to go to class every single day prepared. Every single day that's prepared. And so when studying, studying is one where you have to be proactive and you have to be independent in order to do it and in order to do it well. And it's one of the things that we do, and we leverage it and we use it. We leverage and use AI to help generate detailed study plans. I mean, there is absolutely no reason that people should not be abreast of information. Information today is purely a commodity. No one has, no one owns information today. That is not the truth. Not
yeah, it's definitely not true. No. And if people do not catch up with the age of information going forward, they will be left further behind, right, without a doubt. And another point, running away from critical analysis is typical of a narcissist. I guess it would be typical of you because you never provide any critical analysis. Bitching, moaning, and whining is not critical analysis. In your other comment, if you cannot digest my points of view, you have no points of view. You can block me. You make the decision to come on my show at 8:30 every Monday. I don't send you an email. You make the decision. You take time out of your schedule. So again, I don't have time for the bitching, moaning, and whining from an individual that offers nothing to my show. So I will stop reading your comments and you would just be here watching. Simple as that. And Lisa has another comment. Teach high school kids to ask for the grading rubric at the beginning of every semester and have continued communication with the teacher. I just had the conversation with someone the other day about this, how important it is to build a relationship with your teacher, be it at the high school, middle school, or college level. You know, sometimes the difference between a grade being changed is having a critical conversation with your professor, in college at least, after a test, because they see that you understand exactly. I mean, I've had grades change just from challenging the questions on the test. And you have to build that relationship with your professors because professors know you're paying to get an education. They want to see you succeed. I don't think there's a single professor, no matter what college you're at, be it Michigan, in the state of Michigan, state of Ohio, state of California, there's not a single professor that wants to see those students fail because they know that their success is predicated on your success. So I tell people all the time, get to know your professors, have those conversations, particularly in some of these classes with a lecture hall of 300 or more people. You're just a number. The only way you can stand out is getting to know your professor. I learned that initially going to college. I was at a small liberal arts college in Alabama, but once I transferred to Eastern Michigan University, being in a lecture hall with 150, 200 people, I learned the importance of building a relationship with my professors.
And then remember, today, in the age of AI, that is not as important as being proactive and being independent about learning. Certainly, seeking and having that grading rubric, that is critical and important. You got to be able to do that. And that continued communication with the teacher, that is critical in that. But learning how to study is, I'd say, probably one of the most critical elements that can occur. Learning how to study.
Well, not just that, you brought up a great point, but also Mr. 1213 brought up another great point. Counselors are important in letting students know if they are falling behind, and if they should go to summer school. Great point at the high school level and at the college level, because counselors, as well as academic advisors, play a very critical role. Counselors in high school, academic advisors in college. If you know how to build and create that relationship with those individuals that care about your well-being and moving forward through your college career, an academic advisor is the best friend you can have. At the high school level, a college counselor is the best thing you can have, because they will do what they feel is in the best interest of you as a student. If they see potential in you, they will definitely take care of you. And one last comment to Mr. 12 Les Moore. I'm an anti-Black zealot. Let me tell you, brother, I would challenge you to any and everything when it comes to what I'm doing for Black people. At the high school level, at the college level, and at the employment level. You will not be able to touch me when it comes to what I'm doing for Black people. So with that bullshit about being a Black zealot, again, brother, you do not have to watch my show ever again on Mondays at 8:30. And I would not, from this point forward, I would not even waste time addressing you. So unless you understand what an anti-Black person is, then, and I didn't call you a bitch. I said bitching, whining, and moaning. Difference. So obviously, the emotional intelligence of you and your mental state, you need to seriously look in the mirror. But again, find something to do next Monday at 8:30, because I would not be wasting my time speaking to you, and you're wasting your time coming on my show. One last comment before we go, because I'll let you comment on Dr. Nixon.
Yeah, Mr. 12-13. Interesting comment. I'd say that having counselors be involved is significant, but with the time that it takes to get information on students, often by the time they figure out they're behind, it's almost like it's too late.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely too late.
You cannot get behind. You cannot get behind. And learning how to study puts you in a position where you're not going to get behind. You're going to stay ahead.
And G Money, you are, no one, we use the automobile industry as an example, and I use it as an example based on my experience in that field. I can also speak to the healthcare field. When I initially started with one of the major health insurance companies here in the Detroit area, I took a test with about 100 people. Of that 100 people, only 4 of us passed the test, myself included. The director of operations asked me, what is it about this test? So many people not passing. I told him point blank, I'm no genius, but it wasn't a hard test. They found it necessary to get an easier test so they can ensure that more people were passing the test. Now, that's dumbing down your system. And that's not fair to the consumer market that you're dealing with. So again, and this goes back over 30 years. So it's nothing new. We just have to find a way to do better in this age of education. And the crisis is not going to get better until people make it a concerted effort to do no more than what they did in the state of Mississippi and go from number 49 to number 19. That's a monumental achievement, and I don't refer to it, and we've had this conversation, I don't refer to it as the Mississippi miracle. I refer to it as doing what was necessary to get out of that bottom tier of educational outcomes for a state. It just happened to be a state that has a lot of Black people. And that's one reason why they diminish it and call it the Mississippi miracle instead of calling it the success that it actually was or has been. So again, I want to thank you, Dr. Nixon. We got to continue this conversation. I enjoy talking to you when we do talk, when we're not on the platform like a podcast. Your wealth of knowledge is just impeccable, and keep doing what you're doing over at T-Lab, because again, I have the daughter of Stewart, who also, her name is Derica. The success, I can look to her and know that your program works, because she has become an amazing success, and your program, T-Lab, is a part of the reason why she has.
Well, thank you so much, Eric Brown. Keep up all the great stuff that you're doing in the city. We need you. Thank you.
Okay, let me answer this last question, Dr. Nixon. It's directed directly at you. That comes from a viewer, and it's a very good question. Can you see it?
Yes. Well, we have a formal method of teaching kids how to study, where we evaluate their tendency, whether they're either proactive or they reactive in their approach, whether they're independent or whether they are dependent in their approach for learning. We asked our students to develop detailed study plans at least 2 months before the new semester and start working on it. And we asked our students to go into class every single day with the goal of performing and measuring that performance. We have what's called a classroom performance scorecard, where the student is responsible for maintaining the daily metrics, because that is part of the issue. Part of the issue is the kid can go to class 1 day, 2 days, and think that they're getting by, but they're not. You can't afford to be behind, not at all. And so we position students where that just does not happen.
And how can they get in touch with you, Dr. Nixon, and find out more about T-Lab?
Oh, they could reach me at 888-327-3387. 888-327-3387.
All right. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your contributions to the show this evening, and look forward to having additional conversations with you over the years.
Thank you, Eric Brown. Appreciate you.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Again, thank you all for joining us this evening in Barbershop Talk WRCH. Dr. Nixon is a wealth of knowledge, and if you need further information on how to get in touch with him, you can put the comments in the comment section, and I will relay the information again if you did not have a chance to write it down. So again, thank everyone for joining me this evening. Until next week, another great show. Again, the topic of education for the next 3 weeks. April 6th and April 12th, we'll focus on conversations directly with teachers, educators, and then on April the 12th, conversation will be with students and what do they think is necessary to improve the educational process, not just here in the Detroit metropolitan area, but all across the country. So until next week, be safe, be good, go blue, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
So pick these out, they go over there.